Racing Online here with the Prime Sports Network, previewing Sunday's Big Machine Music City Grand Prix on the streets of Nashville. Last time out, Joseph Newgarden swept the weekend in Iowa. A lot of things we talked about ended up coming to fruition, but I digress. Here we are coming into Nashville, 5 races to go. That'll be one of my points I talk about here pretty soon. But first, before we go through the 5 things to break down, I want to make sure you guys sign up for the Discord community, motorsports community, where you can ask us any questions. We're usually on it, IndyCar, NASCAR, betting advice, anything you want. Make sure you download that app and sign up for the Discord community there on Motorsports, and we'll be sure to comment back and forth with you. It's an easy way to get in contact with us directly. Same for NASCAR fans. If you're a NASCAR fan, you can find the link to our preview show this week in the description area. We're about to tape that too, so be sure to watch both, because we got NASCAR in Michigan, which will actually be right after the IndyCar race. IndyCar 12:30 green, NASCAR up 246. Unfortunately, not on the same network, but they aren't going head-to-head against each other this year, because the IndyCar race should be done before the NASCAR race gets started. So be sure, subscribe, hit the like button on both, and help us out any way you can. Leading into this, we'll look at the 5 things that I'm watching. And the first topic that I'm watching is that of Team Penske. As I said, Joseph Newgarden swept the last time out in Iowa. But Penske's got a little work to do now. They're starting to heat back up in terms of wins and reaching victory lane. But the problem is they're kind of not gaining much on Alex Palou in points. Yes, Joseph Newgarden knocked 46 points off in Iowa. Sounds great, but that points lead still at 80 over Newgarden right now. So, which leads me to why I'm watching him, is Scott McLaughlin mentioned in Iowa after he qualified on the front row that they're going to start trying some things out. They're going to start swinging for the fences more. And he's kind of proved that right the last few races, because if you look at Toronto, they went off strategy. They just could have followed Christian Lundgaard in the pits, had a solid top 2, maybe top 3 at worst, potentially a race win. They didn't pit. Everybody's like, what are they doing? Why did they not do it? And it dropped in the 6th. In Iowa, race 2, same thing. He was second at a time for a late race caution. They decided to pit when others didn't. It took him off sequence, took him outside the top 10, and he never got back up to second. But they had to try something. And the reason I look at that is that's 20 points he gave away in the process. And some people might say, that's 20 points. Why'd you give up that many? Well, they had to take the risk, because he's 148 points down with 5 races to go entering this weekend. And if you get those 20 points back, he'd be 120 points out. So it really, or 128. So it really doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things. They're after wins. And it's not just him that's after wins. Newgarden's got to get some more wins. Will Power is the same boat of McLaughlin. So I think they're in the point they've got to be on the attack mode. They got to go off strategy any way they can. Honda is a perfect 4 for 4 on street courses. They've got the superior package. So Chevy's going to have to do something to stop this momentum for the Honda side, and Team Penske's going to have to do something to close the gap in the points. They went 1-2-5 in both races at Iowa, literally same thing both races. They led 492 of 500 laps that weekend, 98.4%. So they really are hitting on things now. Again, they're just too far out really to do much about it unless you start swinging for the fences, which is why I'm watching them. They started off 3 for 3 on street courses last year with 3 different drivers winning. They're 0 for 6 since. And 2 of the last 6, they had the second place finisher, including this race last year. So that's why I'm watching. What can Team Penske do this weekend? Can they close that gap? Do they swing up for the fences? Does it pay off for them? Or do they slip further back? And that's where they're at. Because if they just go status quo and follow around Alex Palou, they're not going to gain much, and it's not going to be a championship in the end. So I'm watching them see what they do, which leads me into topic number 2, Ganassi versus Andretti. Coming in, Penske, as I said, they're swinging for the fences. Ganassi is the one to watch on street courses in general. Chip Ganassi Racing last season, they start off over 3 because Penske won those 3. However, Ganassi was next best in class, 2.8, 9.23 at St. Pete, 3.6, 20 and 22 in Long Beach, 3.6, 7 and 22 in Detroit. Granted, those 20th place finishes were Jimmy Johnson. The rest are up front. Since they won Toronto, they won Nashville, they won St. Pete. They had the 3.58, 27 in Long Beach. first, fourth, eighth, and ninth in Detroit. And then the last street course in Toronto, second, fourth, seventh, and 11th. They've only lost 2 races on these tracks in the last 6. They're undefeated in Nashville, and they've taken 4 of the 6 podiums on these streets in Nashville. So they're the ones that are probably going to be the one to watch in general, which is why, as I said, Penske's got to swing for the fences. Scott Dixon hasn't finished worse than second here. He's going to make his 318th consecutive start, which will tie Tony Kanaan for the most consecutive starts in NTT IndyCar Series history. So that's a storyline in itself. He was third back in March in St. Pete. And why he was last in Long Beach was because he was punted while running the top 5 with Pato Award. Fourth in Toronto, fourth in Detroit. He hasn't finished worse than 7th outside of 1 race this season. So if you look at what he's doing, he's right there. It's just Alex Palou. He's stealing the limelight from him. On street courses this year, he was 8th, 5th, 1st, and 2nd. He's got 5 podiums in the last 6 races on the season alone. He was 3rd in this race last year. That's why I said, again, Penske's got to swing for the fences. If he just keeps doing what he's doing, you're never going to catch him just staying status quo. Dixon's the one that could take the win. It's not a steal, but Scott Dixon winning this race last year. As you see, he's got Scott McLaughlin right here behind him, Penske guy we just talked about, Alex Palou right there in 3rd. If they finish this way again, it's not really gaining much of anything. And so that's why I mentioned Ganassi is going to be those ones to watch because of that. Marcus Ericsson, he won their inaugural race. He's got 2 podiums and 4 street course starts this season, including the one in St. Pete. He was 4th on the final lap in Toronto before running out of gas. So what can he do? He's got this. He scored the most points on street course races since 2021. So he's going to be another factor. Marcus Ericsson should be a factor. So I'm watching the Ganassi guys. However, Andretti's also had good pace on street course races. They just haven't delivered. In Toronto, they were 1-2-4 in practice on Friday. They were 1-2 on Saturday. Then the rain hit and it relegated them to starting 8th, 9th, 14th, and 22nd. They just didn't have much in the way of the rain. In the dry conditions, they were good. Long Beach, they were also even better. Kyle Kirkwood won the race. Romain Grosjean started on the front row. Detroit, they were good. So I'm just curious with those guys, what can they do? Can they maximize a full race weekend? Colton Herta should have won this race in 2021, rebounded in this race last year for a top 5. What can he do? He's coming off a podium in Toronto. So I'm just curious. Andretti and Ganassi have had the top 2 teams, I'll say, on street courses this season. We just haven't seen them fight each other really for wins. Andretti's had the speed, Ganassi's had the finishes. Can they mix them all together? If so, that's 8 cars right there that could take top 10 spots, which again is why Penske has to swing for the fences to try to get ahead, which leads me to my next topic is points. That's the 3rd point. It's clear Alex Palou is definitely the front runner to win this championship. Since 2008, 8 times has the driver that's led the points at this point of the year, with 5 races to go, has won the championship, including 3 of the last 4 races, or 3 of the last 4 years. Alex Palou just seems untouchable right now. And if you look at him on the final 4 races, their final 5 races that are in this stretch, Alex Palou's won at 3 of them. And like I said, he was on podium last year at this track. So his thought process was, let me get as many points over this race, again, podium, next race, which we go to Indy on the road course next week, where he won by almost 20 seconds. And can he gain more points on the competition going to Gateway? Because that's his plan. That's what he wants to do. Because if you go to Gateway and this deficit from the advantage to the rest of the pack is at least 80 points, that's more than a 1 race lead with 3 races to go, which means he almost would have this championship in the bag, which is why I'm watching points. Can Joseph Newgarden cut off any more of his deficit? It's 80 points entering this weekend. We talked about what they need to do, kind of swing for the fences. Scott Dixon's well over 100 points behind. If he does what he just saw in the video, he wins again, but Palou finishes 3rd. He really only gained a little over 10 points. It's not going to do what Dixon needs done. So can Palou have some misfortune? Can Dixon and Newgarden capitalize? That's why I'm watching points this weekend is what's it going to look like leaving here? Because we know what Palou can do at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the road course with just winning a few months ago, which leads me into topic number 4. As I said, if he falls into trouble, early race troubles have been a theme here. Marcus Ericsson, as we saw in that video, he got airborne early on in the race in 2021. He came back and won. Last year, Scott Dixon, he had problems early. collected an early race crash. There you go. There's that video right there of Ericsson. That you would think would take him out of the race. He ended up winning the race after a moment like this. It's because he was off strategy. There was other carnage. He had a pit on a different cycle, and he cycled to the lead, which is like what Penske needs to do. They need to go off cycle and hope cautions help him. With him ending up winning that race, which was remarkable, Scott Dixon, he didn't get airborne, but he had to pit multiple times for repairs last year. He restarted outside the top 20 near the mid-race mark, and he ended up winning. So guys are rebounding here. Colton Herta and Alexander Rossi each had early race troubles last year, still finished in the top 5. So Nashville is a place that it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter what happens early. Somebody's probably going to have a problem and rebound later. Can they do it? Who is it? Who's it going to be? Nobody knows. This is an ultimate wild card race. This is IndyCar's version of what NASCAR would have at Daytona or Talladega. There's just so much carnage in this track that anything can happen to anybody at any time. Out of this 160 combined laps that we've turned in this race, so 80 each year, 43% of them have been run under caution, with 38% of the cars being loaded onto the haulers early for crashes. That's a lot. That's a lot of attrition. The inaugural race had 9 cautions for 33 laps. Last year was 8 cautions for 36 laps. So a lot of times we've seen guys the track gets clogged. People end up running into other cars. They get punted for no reason. It's just the nature that this track is a wild card super speedway type race on a street course, which is why anything can happen. Alex Palou's points lead, it could grow exponentially if Dixon or Newgarden have troubles, or it could shrink even more if he gets caught in something, which is why these last 2 points kind of coincide with each other with the points in general. And as you see in this, the restart right down there on the video, you can see look how clogged that track is right there. Just everybody runs into each other. There's nowhere to go. And some people may wonder, what's the difference? St. Pete, same street course, 5 cautions for 26 laps. It's only 26%. Last year, 1 caution for 8 laps, 8%. Long Beach, 2 cautions for 7 laps. It's 8% of the race this past April, 4 for 14 the year before. Detroit this past year, 7 cautions for 32 laps, which is 32% of the race was under caution. But last year in Belle Isle, 1 caution. Toronto last year, 4 cautions for 15 laps. This year, 3 for 16 laps. So they're all hovering between really 10 and 18% of their race has been under caution. Nashville's 43%. It's double. So that's why this track could be interesting to see what happens this weekend with the carnage, which leads to the final point, how it all is tying together, pit strategy. Who's going to make the overcut or undercut moves and catch the caution when you need it? Because that's why a lot of these times these fields are getting flipped, because somebody might have already pit. A caution comes out for a melee somewhere on the track, and the guy that already pit is going to rebound all the way up to the lead. Can they stay there? Because that happened twice last year where it teetered with it flipped the field, then it flipped it back, and then it flipped again, which helped Scott Dixon. So pitch strategy is going to be everything, but nobody knows what to do with pitch strategy when you can't plan for these type of cautions and carnage, which makes this race the ultimate wild card, which is why those are all the things that I'm watching this weekend. It should be an interesting one. We got 5 races left again. Indy's next week on the road course. Can Alex Palou, he's going to stay in the points lead, but is it going to get bigger than 80 points, or is it going to shrink more? That's something we're going to watch. Should be a fun weekend. Big announcements today, later dates. We're not going to talk much about it because we're taping this before, but it's rumored that this announcement is going to be this race, a carnage-filled super speedway wildcard type race is going to be the season finale for IndyCar next year, which is something to be said with the new layout. It's going to race downtown Broadway. So that should be announced here in a little bit. But first things first, Sunday's race, that's what we're previewing here. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to Prime Sports Network. Catch all of our videos here. Like, subscribe, follow us on Discord, and hope you have a good race weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.